Hi everyone, I'm Rod and I've been an IT contractor for over 20 years. When I first started working, everyone was in effect a permanent employee. The concept of contractor didn't even exist at that point. However, in the 90s, contracting emerged as a new way for people to earn a living. I saw colleagues in my company doing similar work to me, but they were working as contractors and they seemed to have it all. Great pay, great opportunities, and the freedom to move between jobs and companies whenever they wanted. I felt stuck where I was and decided to jump onto the contracting bandwagon. But to say the move from permanent to contracting is a steep learning curve is a real understatement. I don't think I'd ever seen a contract at that point, let alone signing one that would fundamentally change how I earned an income. I wish I knew then what I know now. So, this video explains some of the things that I wish I knew before starting as an IT contractor, and I hope it's educational. I'll be covering off the actual mechanics of the contract itself. So, who does a contractor really work for? Do you have to have your own company to be a contractor? And how does the contract actually work? Just before we get started, some quick disclaimers. This video does not offer legal, financial, accounting or taxation advice. It's for general information purposes only, and is based on my experience as a contractor. And as you might be able to tell from my accent, I am indeed an Australian, and all of my contracting experience has been gathered from working here. There are certain sections that are very specific to Australia, so they may not apply to you if you're working somewhere outside of our fair country. Number one, the mechanics of contracting. So you want to become a contractor, but who do you actually work for? Do you work directly for the company like a permanent employee does? Well, no you don't. So we're going to go through how does the arrangement actually hang together. There are three parties involved in this arrangement, and there are two contracts. So we have the client, the agency, and obviously the contractor. The client is the company that the contractor will ultimately perform the work for. The agency is an intermediary who engages the contractor and provides payroll. And the contractor is the person doing all the hard yakka. Now that all sounds pretty confusing, so let's discuss who's who in a hypothetical situation. The client is the company looking to fill a position for a set period of time. So let's call them Federation Bank. They need a software developer for a 6-month project. So Federation Bank then engages Haystack Recruitment to find a suitably qualified developer to perform the work. That's the first contract between the client and the agency. Haystack Recruitment's business is to find the right person for their client. So they will reach out to you, the super software developer, and they will make an introduction between you and Federation Bank. The contractor will interview directly with the client, and if everything goes well, the client will get back to Haystack Recruitment and say, this is the person we want to work for, us. Haystack is paid a commission from Federation Bank for the period of time the contractor works there. So this is over and above the contractor's daily payment rate. However, Haystack is not the employer of the contractor, rather they just enter into a contract for the provision of services. So this is contract 2 between Haystack and the contractor. So while you have a contract with Haystack Recruitment, you're actually providing your services as the super software developer to Federation Bank. You're paid for your time by Haystack Recruitment, but you're not an employee of Haystack, nor are you technically an employee of Federation Bank. Number 2, understand your contract. And this is probably the most critical lesson that I had to learn, is the contract is the be all and end all. It is defining your rights, your responsibilities, and you really need to understand who you're contracting with and what all the clauses in this contract mean. The contract between the contractor and the agency is an agreement to provide professional services. It is not an employment contract. So there are no industry awards, there are no union agreements. It is a strict contract between two parties. Therefore, you have to read every single clause. It's not an end user license agreement where you can just scroll down to the bottom and click OK and rely on luck or good fortune to cover you. It's not going to happen. You need to understand the restrictions and the covenants that are in place on you. You need to make sure your pay rates are right. Is it inclusive of all the extras like superannuation, goods and services tax, local taxes, etc.? You need to be clear on what the contract term is and what the notice periods are available to you. So for instance, you might be subject to a 2-week notice period or 4-week notice period, or no notice period at all. You need to be clear on that. Understand who the contracted parties are. So you're talking with a recruitment agency, but are they the ones providing the contract? Some of the bigger agencies will have an employment section or a payroll section or an outsourcing section. You need to be clear who you're actually contracting with. And the biggest lesson of all, nothing's official until everyone's signed. So you think you've got a contract, it's sitting there until you've signed and they've signed, it doesn't come into effect. Number 3, negotiating pay rates. So when you first started talking to the agency, there should have been some sort of indication of the pay rates that were being offered by the client. So this shouldn't be a real surprise, but there is still something that you need to do when you're negotiating the final pay amount. You may well think that there'll be an offer from the clients and then that's the time that you actually hit them up for the rate that you want. It doesn't really work that way. It works the opposite way. You negotiate with the agency, you come to an agreement on what the rate is going to be, and they'll let you know whether it's in the range that the client is going to accept or not. It's fun to think that, hey, I've been offered the job and I'm really experienced in my industry and I can charge whatever I want. But the reality is that there may be a set range that the client's offering, or there might be a small difference between the upper and lower bounds that they're prepared to offer. So there may not be a lot of room to negotiate. So if you're going to apply for a role, when you're talking to the recruiter, you need to understand what the rates are that are available for you. However, you still need to make sure that the rates that you're talking about, you agree from both sides. So, are you registered for goods and services tax? If so, your rate needs to be plus GST. Are you being offered this inclusive of superannuation, or are you expected to pay super yourself? Are there any extras that you think should be included? This is the time to make sure you understand what your rates are going to be and agree with the agency on that. Number 4, are you contracting through your own private company or as a pay-as-you-go? Now, I've done both of these things. There are pros and cons, and I can't give any advice either way, other than to say, speak to your accountant for taxation and other advice on which is going to work the best for you. But we'll go through the differences. Pay-as-you-go, also known as PAYG, is the default position. So if you don't have a private company, this is the way that it's going to work for you. The agency will manage your payroll deductions just like an employer would. So they'll withhold PAYG tax instalments, they'll make superannuation contributions, and they'll pay into your bank account just like an employer would. So think of them as an employer without being your employer. They'll take care of all of the paperwork. They'll also issue you a payment summary at the end of the financial year. If, however, you have your own private company, it's a little more complicated. There's now another party into the contract. So you've got a contract between the client and the agency, you've got another contract between the agency and your private company, and notionally you have a contract between your private company and yourself as an employee of that company. So your agency pays your company the gross amount. They don't look after PAYG, they don't look after super. They pay you the whole amount up front, including GST if need be, and then your company needs to work out all of the payments that need to be made on behalf of you as an employee. They pay you. They also may need to take care of things like workers' compensation policies, professional indemnity insurance, public liability insurance, company registration, company tax returns, goods and services tax returns, and PAYG withholding. Your company needs to look after that. Your agency will just pass you one single amount, and then you're the employee of your company. Number 5, the background check. This one came as a bit of a surprise to me, I must say. As a permanent employee, you might do a background check when you start a role, but that's the last you hear of it. As a contractor, you'll need to perform a background check before starting every contract with a new client, even if you've been to that client before. I've been to some clients 4 or 5 times. I've only been out of the company for maybe 6 months on another contract, and I've come back. As soon as you come back, you need to do a background check again. Now, these background checks can take a couple of weeks to complete, so you need to factor that in around what your start date is going to look like, particularly if you're rolling off of an old contract. Your agency will engage with the private company who will go off to do all of the background searches, to engage the relevant agencies, and to make sure that you get a clean bill of health. So they'll go off and ask for reference checks. So if you give anyone as a reference, they may well contact that referee and say, hey, did you actually authorise this reference? Is the person saying all the things that you would say, etc., etc. They will then importantly go and do a police and criminal history background check. And if you've lived in multiple states or multiple jurisdictions, they will do a check in each of those jurisdictions. You need to provide your address for at least the last 5 years, so if you've moved a bit, that may slow things down if this company has to go to various police agencies around the country to get different checks completed. Depending on your industry, you may also need industry checks. So for instance, I work in banking and I'll have an anti-money laundering check done to make sure that I'm not a prohibited person, and also an APRA agency check as well to see whether I've been banned or have any actions outstanding against me. And the company may also check your qualifications. So you used to be able to maybe sneakily increase that degree to a master's, or change your degree from an arts degree to an engineering degree on your CV, and no one will check. They're clamping down on that. They'll go back to your university or your college and they'll check that your qualifications are what you've actually said they are. So it's an important thing to remember. They'll keep doing this every time you change contracts. So there's some timing that you need to allow for before your contract will start. Because believe me, a client will not let you come on board until you've had this check completed and you've passed. Number 6, managing the end of your contract. So I do have another video which addresses the differences between permie and contract work, which you might like to check out. But since we're talking contracts, I thought this was the appropriate time to actually discuss what it means and what you need to do to manage a contract that's about to come to an end. So I have a confession, I learnt this one the really hard way. I had a contract that came to an end, I didn't manage it properly, I turned up to work and they said, what are you doing here? And I said, what do you mean, what am I doing here? I work here. No, you don't have a contract. No warning, I was out in the street. Pretty brutal. So, the lesson from that, know the end date of your contract. Keep it in mind, keep it in a diary. Your agency may manage it, may not. Your client may manage it, may not, but you are the one who's looking for work, you're the one who's paying the bills. Make sure you know what your contract date is going to roll over or renew. So you look for a renewal from your client, they say yes, they're happy. Make sure that everyone gets it in writing. So it gets updated between the client and the agency gives you a renewal notice or maybe a new contract. Unless it's in writing, it's not going to happen. At this point, if you've been in your contract for a period of time, say 12 months, you might be able to discuss a rate rise with the agency. Now, it depends on what your industry is doing. It depends on what your role is. If your role's changed or expanded, you might be able to push the rate up a bit. I always start looking for a new role at least 6 weeks before the contract end date. That's how long it's going to take me to get everything organised, to get my new CV together, to reach out to my network, start looking at job sites, update my LinkedIn status, etc., and start the job hunt, do the interviewing, get everything organised, get my background checks done, and be ready to start the next contract. Personally, I like rolling from one contract into the next. I don't like any dead time in between. I want to plan my own vacation time. So 6 weeks is the minimum that I need to actually get it all done. I'm going to repeat my warning, just to be boring. If you don't manage the end of your contract, no one else is going to, and it's just going to end on you, and you're suddenly looking for a contract, and if it takes you 6 weeks, that's 6 weeks you don't get paid. So be on top of this one. So there we have it, things I wish I knew about IT contracting before I started, and the mechanics of how the contracts hang together. If you'd like to know more about the differences between permanent and contracting roles, particularly what the pay is like and around what the benefits are, then please check out my other video on this channel. Also, if you kindly like or subscribe, that will really help me out. I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.